Guys, it's really wonderful to be here today and to be able to share with you. I've been in recovery now for just over 2 years, and I can say two things. One thing is that I'm closer to Jesus than I ever have been. And the second thing is I'm making good choices, better choices for myself and for my family and for my friends. And because of that, I have better relationships. And coming to love myself more, and not only love myself, but to trust myself more, which is for me is a big thing because sometimes I lack trust in myself. Trusted God, but not necessarily trusted myself. I wanted to talk about fear today because even though I'm in recovery, fear comes up in my life. And while it is easier than it was before to deal with the fear, I felt that I needed to remind myself of some of the things that I've learned about fear through LifeLab, the Big Book Awakening, and through devotional 12 steps devotional books I've been reading. If we go to page 17 in the LifeLab, the definition they have there, and I think it nails it really well. It says here, fear is an unpleasant emotion caused by exposure to danger, expectation of pain, anxiety, worry, terror, tension, timidity, apprehension, panic, phobia, dread, and troubling events. Here's the big thing. It is the consequence of being separated from God. Now, before LifeLab, I wouldn't have known that, or I wouldn't have concentrated on that, but I know that now. Effects of fear. It affects our spirit, our soul, our body, and it can cause us to become a slave to our fears over and over and over. See a gerbil going in the wheel over and over and over. And that's how fear affects us. But the good news is that there's godly fear, and it's good for us. We have godly fear to warn us to take avoiding action in a dangerous situation. I can remember where godly fear has helped me, where I was thinking about going on a trip to a certain designation. And I kept having this troubling spirit inside myself that said, don't go, don't go. And it was for good reason, because the 401 was in very bad condition, and there was a terrible accident on the 401. I'm not saying I would have been involved in that accident, but I feel like I had that warning, and I needed that warning, and I was thankful for that warning. Now, there's a big difference between godly and ungodly fear. When fear goes past a warning and begins to have a foothold in our lives, it colors everything. How we think, how we act, how we react, how we deal with people. It even affects our decisions. And sometimes we make decisions out of fear rather than out of the right reasons. It's a fear that can come on us and it can grip us, just like this. It can grip us and hold it in its hand. And it's like it doesn't allow us to move forward. We are stuck. And we try and we try, and it seems like we can't get out of the cycle. We don't want the fear, but it comes back and it grips us, and it causes us not to reach the potential that God has for us, the person that God wants us to be. Common fears. I'd like to talk about 4 of them. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of illness, death and dying, and phobias. So of those, I want to drill down to one of them. And that was the third one I mentioned, which was fear of illness, death, and dying. 5 years ago, I was really struggling with a terrible back, and I had pain that didn't really allow me to walk or to work. Basically, it resulted in me being kind of isolated at my home because of the pain that I had in my back. And I went and I had an MRI, and the results of the MRI was they thought that they saw a tumor on my spine. So when I went to get blood work, the lady said to me, and I don't know why she said it, maybe it was a mistake. I don't think she should have said it to me. If it turns out that you have bone cancer, the pain's not going to leave you. And unless the marrow transplant works for you, your time here could be short. Well, I absolutely got caught up in it, and I couldn't let it go. First thing in the morning, I thought about it. The last thing at night, I thought about it. When I saw my daughter, I thought, will I see her married? When I saw my friends, will we have another time to go to a hockey game together? All these negative thoughts were in my head, and they were going like this, round my head, and around my head. And the result was that I went into a major depression. And the fear was so strong, I thought I'd never get over it. But I did. And some of that was cognitive therapy and challenging myself to say, where was the evidence to suggest that I was actually going to die? Because they did other medical tests, a body scan on me, they couldn't see anything. But somehow it's like I had a trauma. Like I just couldn't get away from it. But I did. And my life today is good. In fact, it's really good. How does fear enter our lives? Our sin, others' sin, generational sin, shock, and trauma. I think what I was just talking about was shock and trauma. But I want to talk about another thing, our sin, my sin. When I was a consumer of pornography, I found that by using it, I was setting myself up for fear. Fear would come into my life because I had opened the door for the fear to come in. And at first, because I'm a stubborn person, I didn't believe it. But over time, and it happened, and it happened, and it happened, and I said, yeah, I guess that's true. And the other one I want to talk about is generational sin. And I want to talk about worry. Trusting worry more than you trust God. I'll say that again. Trusting worry more than God. And even to this day, it is easy for me to get into worry because both of my parents had their PhD worrying. They were good teachers, and I learned from them. I love them to death, but they were warriors. So I picked up that. And I find even today, I can worry. So I have to talk to myself. And I do talk to myself and I say, well, Dale, how are you going to act? Like your parents or like the redeemed man of God that you are? A redeemed man of God trusts in God. He acknowledges that there are circumstances that could lead into worry, but he chooses not to go into the worry cycle. So I can be effective if I allow myself not to open the door into the worry cycle. Because once I'm in it, it's very difficult for me to get out of it. So I have to stop. And sometimes I say, Dale, stop. You need to stop because you know what's going to happen here. You're going to get into this worry cycle and you're going to escalate, and the worry is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger till it's just not true. It's just totally irrational. Dealing with fear. In the book, one of the quotations that they have that I really love: pity those who fear what they shouldn't, and fear not what and those who fear not what they should. I would say that before recovery, I was a poster child for this. Often I would not fear I was fearing the wrong things and not fearing the right things. It's like I was off in my thinking, as if my thinking was dysfunctional. Dysfunctional. So it seemed that when fear was there, I didn't deal with it in the right way. I didn't address it in the right way. There are consequences, as we know, when we make a bad decision, whether it is to get back into our addictions or just make bad choices. And sometimes when we're in a good place, we sit back and it's sad for us to see people where they're spending their lives haunted by fear. The joy of life has vanished. It seems like it's been squeezed out of them. All they can hear in their head is the fear of failure, criticism, betrayal. And oh my God, if someone asks them to change something, they go ballistic. What do you mean you want to change that? What's wrong with the way it is? They can't handle any kind of change. Everything that someone says to them seems to make them feel that they're rejected, or that they're lonely, or they're living in poverty, or that everyone notices that they're growing old, or they look sickly, or you see that person where all they can talk about is, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. That they start with that and they end with that, and they talk to you. And sometimes the result of fear is they really can't talk about anything because their mind's going so fast, they can't get words out of their mouth. It's almost like they're stuck. Another quote that comes out of the LifeLab book is, the fear of death doesn't prevent us from death. It merely prevents us from living. I'm going to say that again because this is a very significant thing that we need to think about. The fear of death doesn't prevent us from death. It merely prevents us from living. There are negatives that go along with fear. It's as if we have a virus that's mutating inside our body and in our mind, and its objective is to cause havoc in our life. In every facet of our life, it causes havoc. Fear can transform into suspicion, mistrust, anger, hostility, aggression, anxiety, worry, hopelessness, and an assortment of other negative emotions. Recently, I had an opportunity to go skiing for the long weekend. I, they were going to a ski hill that I really like skiing on. I was going with dear friends and people that when my daughter was young, we used to go skiing with. And I had this feeling inside myself that I shouldn't go because somehow in my head, I had this idea that if I went skiing, I was going to break my leg. So over the next 3 days, I did everything I possibly could do to sabotage that activity, saying, well, we don't have someone to take care of our dogs. Well, I don't know if I have the strength to do skiing anymore. Anyway, I came up with an assortment of different kinds of excuses as to why I shouldn't go. Well, thank goodness for daughters and son-in-laws, and they said, that's ridiculous. You're coming if you don't ski, you should come. We got a place for the dogs. There's no reason you can't come. So I went. Wow. What happens when we don't respond to fear? It was an awesome weekend. How was it awesome? I skied like I used to ski really well. The snow was perfect for me. We had great meals eating together. We played games at night. I got to be outside, and I don't know about your folks, but my best self is outside. The best version of me is outside. So one day we went snowshoeing, and we went around this lake. The sun was coming down, and I made this comment. Have you noticed that everyone that we meet is smiling? They were smiling and they were happy. People were laughing and people were together, and it was just a great experience. Page 67. Now we're going to go over to the big book. States that fear was as evil and corroding, that fear is evil than and a corroding thread. The fabric of our lives was shot through it. It sets in motion trains of circumstances which bring about, are you ready to hear it? Misfortune that we feel that we don't need. It sets the ball rolling on negative thinking. I can't. I won't. It causes us to have a big pity party. So you may ask, how did I deal with fear pre-recovery? I'm going to give you a couple of them. I medicated my fear through addictive behavior. How did I do that? Using pornography, sometimes overeating, overindulging. Sometimes I shopped to make myself to feel better. Sometimes I gamble with the hope of believing that it would provide me with the money that I need to pay some bills. And one of the things that I'm really not proud of, sometimes I put down others to feel better about myself. And I would point the finger, you know, a judgmental finger. And I was good at that. Minimization. Sometimes I would minimize the significance of the fear. I wouldn't acknowledge to myself what a grip it had on me. I wouldn't take responsibility for my part in these dramas of life. Blamed others. If they just wouldn't, or if they just would. And then, of course, pity party time. Poor Dale. Poor Dale. Look at poor Dale. The Lord hasn't given me he's given me lousy cards. That was one of my favorite things. The Lord has given me lousy cards. And of course, because I'm a codependent, those tendencies came out, trying to control and fix and blame others. Feeding my obsessive thoughts and actions and creating chaos. Why be on time when you can be late? Well, of course I can do that. Thinking that if I took it on, people would see me and then it would make me feel better about myself. Being a martyr. My mom, Gladys Elizabeth Clay, she was a martyr and I learned from her. And then the other thing, because of my judgmental spirit, feeling that I was the right person to teach someone a lesson. And that destroyed some of my best relationships. I picked this out. It's the step 4 prayer, freedom from fear. And if you would like, as I say, you could say it with me. And here we go. My God, please allow me to identify and honestly review my fears so that I can see what is underneath the symptoms. What is the root cause? Please allow my thinking to clearly reveal what you would have me do, and then allow me to trust and humbly rely on you rather than myself. This is an amazing prayer, and it helps me focus on my fears, on my resentments, all those kind of things that are that work against me being my best self. And there's two other words that really stood out for me: trust God, and humbly rely on Him. Because before, there was only one person that could fix my problems, and that was me, because I knew myself the best. So I want to share with you the Dale way of dealing with fears. So what I've started to do is I allocate 2 times per week to deal with my fears. And I go back to my fear inventory that I did as part of LifeLab, and it's a big book, Awakening. And then I begin by saying whatever it could be. Maybe the issue is trust, trusting God, trusting others. I ask God to reveal the root cause. What causes me not to trust? And somebody gave me an example of they have the fear of public speaking. And I asked them, why do you fear public speaking? And they said, when I was a child, grade 5, I had to get up and I had to recite a poem. And I was so nervous that I got all the lines mixed up. It was just a jumble. And my teacher and all the other students laughed at me. So I have this fear that if I do public speaking, the same thing was going to happen. The second step, seek God's wisdom. Is there something that I'm doing that's allowing fear to come into my life? I'll just go over what I talked about before. It could be my sin, other sin. It could be generational sin, or it could be shock or trauma. And then once the fear is identified, my way before was to run away from the fear, saying, I can't deal with this fear. It's too much for me. I sit with the fear. I accept the fear and I say, Lord, Lord, I do have a real problem with commitment, with personal commitment. On one hand, I say, I want intimacy. And on another hand, it seems like I run away from intimacy. Lord, can you help me? I humbly ask you to tell me what I need to understand the root cause of that. And then finally, I ask him to help me to release the fear. So there are ways that help me release fear. One sometime is just to listen to Christian music and just say, Lord, take this from me. Lord, take this from me. Sometimes it's what is necessary. The fear is stuck in me and I need to go out and physically get it out of my system. And the third is that meet with someone, my sponsor, and say, confess how I'm fearful, and asking him to stand with me, pray for me. So I thank you very much. And we know one last thing, for we know that God does not give us the spirit of fear, but of power and strength and power.